Hello and welcome back to PKPSchool's OJS for Editors. In this lesson, we'll get an overview of the roles in OJS so that you have an idea of the different users the editor normally interacts with throughout the publishing process. We'll also take a first look at the controlled access granted by OJS to users in different roles when they log into the system. By the end of the video, you'll be able to summarize the tasks typically associated with each of the roles on the journal's editorial team. Operating a journal is complex, so remembering all of these roles might initially seem a little overwhelming, but you'll very quickly get familiar with them. First, I'd like to introduce Chinedu Olu. Chinedu is the editor of the African Journal of Scholarly Communication. This journal comes out 4 times a year and is reasonably popular, so Chinedu has quite a few submissions from authors to review. Because he publishes a respected, full-length, peer-reviewed scholarly journal, there's a lot of work he needs to delegate to the section editor, copy editor, layout editor, and the proofreaders. In order to bring issues out on time, he uses OJS to communicate with the peer reviewers and the journal team, and to keep track of the editing process as submissions move through the editorial process. A key task that can be performed only by the editor is creating and publishing issues. As you can see, the editor's page in OJS allows Chinedu to see at a glance everything that's going on in the editorial process, and to create issues, notify users of a new issue, work on future issues, and edit back issues. The editor also generally makes the final decision, based on reviewer recommendations, whether to publish a submission. Thus, OJS gives the editor the ability to monitor and work with submissions through a number of submissions pages. We'll be following Chinedu's editing activities throughout the course. This is Olamide Bayor, the Journal Manager for the African Journal of Scholarly Communication. The Journal Manager will not be a prominent figure in this course, but it is important to have a general sense of the work she does to get the journal set up, so that we recognize the editor's specific responsibilities. If you're interested in knowing more about the Journal Manager's role in OJS, PKPSchool also offers an OJS for Journal Managers course, available on this website. Olamide's tasks include setting up the journal by filling in journal information details such as the contact information, copyright policies, author guidelines, and more. She also manages users and their accounts, including assigning roles. Throughout this course, you'll see some pre-written notification emails that various users send via OJS. Sending notifications to other users in a streamlined fashion is one of the main functions of OJS. These form emails are set up by the Journal Manager, although other users, such as the editor or the section editor, can alter or personalize these notifications just before sending them. Olamide has also done the work of setting up review forms, which the reviewers will complete during the peer review process. Kafwe Etse is a section editor for the African Journal of Scholarly Communication. She is a communications professor and performs section editor duties 4 times a year for a handful of submissions to each issue of the journal. The section editor is an optional, but very common role, designed to lighten the load of the editor. As the section editor, Kafwe manages the peer review and editing process of a submission and makes decisions regarding publication in consultation with Chinedu, the editor. To improve the efficiency of a journal, the editor may ask the journal manager to configure the journal so that submissions to a specific section, such as book reviews, automatically go to the appropriate section editor for that section. Alternatively, the editor may manually assign submissions to a section editor as they come in. In some cases, the section editor may act in other capacities too, such as doing copy editing or layout editing. There's some flexibility in defining this role in OJS. This is Fatima Assis. She's an author we'll encounter later in the course when we look in detail at the author's interaction with the journal using OJS. The author does a great deal of her work in word processing software, but she relies on OJS to submit her paper for consideration, to monitor the submission status during the review process, to receive notifications from the editor or section editor, and to interact with the copy editor and proofreader. The author also supplies her own metadata for her submission, such as the article title, author names, abstract, and keywords. Kofi Pepra is one of many reviewers for the journal. This role is also sometimes called a referee. He is valued by Chinedu and Kaifu, the editor and section editor, for his punctuality and even-handed reviews. The African Journal of Scholarly Communication uses double-blind peer review. This means that the identity of the author must be kept secret from the reviewer, and the identity of the reviewer must be kept secret from the author. OJS user accounts allow the reviewer to interact with the editor, who then interacts with the author, keeping any personally identifying information hidden. This is Kaigiso Ogus, a copy editor for the journal. She edits submissions for grammar, spelling, punctuation, and house style, as well as bibliographic style. This happens after peer review is completed, and the author has made any necessary revisions to the content of the article. OJS allows the copy editor to interact with the author and editor while working on a manuscript during this late stage of the editing process. Quadwo Asante is a layout editor for the journal. As the layout editor, Quadwo is the person responsible for the common look of the articles, editing the layout of the final published formats of a submission, such as the PDF. This formatted version of the manuscript is often referred to as the galley. Zolani Bazar acts as a proofreader for the journal. Later in the course, we'll see how he interacts with the layout editor, author, and editor to do a final check for any corrections that need to be made to the galleys prepared by the layout editor. Now let's do a quick review of the roles we've just discussed. You may want to pause the video and test yourself on the duties associated with each role to see how much you can remember. First, we talked about the editor. The editor assigns section editors and reviewers to submissions, oversees the editorial process and decisions, and assembles and publishes issues. Next was the journal manager, who sets up the journal by filling in forms and checking options in OJS. The journal manager also manages users, assigns roles, and creates the prepared emails and review forms in the system. The section editor is a flexible role. She generally assists in managing the peer review and editing process and makes the editorial decision for submissions in consultation with the editor. An author creates metadata for their own submission, such as the article title and the abstract, and if the paper is accepted, she carries out the required revisions to the content and participates in copy editing and proofreading. The reviewer, who may also be known as the referee, carries out peer review of a submission in order to make a recommendation regarding whether it should be published. The copy editor edits the accepted articles for grammar, spelling, punctuation, and conformity to the journal's bibliographic and textual style. The layout editor lays out the galley version of the articles, for example, the PDF or HTML formats. And finally, the proofreader checks for any typographical or layout errors in the final editing step before publication. And that's it. As you proceed with this course, you'll see how all of these roles work together, and by the end, you'll have a good idea of how OJS can help you manage the workflow for your journal. See you next time.